mysterious. Hey everyone, welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. Today's episode is, I don't know if I'd want to live in this house particularly. You tell me. This one comes to us from Lyle and his wife Tracy. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, appreciate it if you'd hit that subscribe button. And I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's smashed that subscribe button. This channel's growing so much faster than I could have ever imagined, and it's awesome. And it's an inspiration, and it makes it more than worth my time. I do this just because it's fun, and to see that there's good people out there that actually enjoy what I put out, even though I know it's not super polished, just makes it all worth it. Happy to have y'all. You're part of the family. Well, let's get into today's encounter. My wife and I had been living in the Portland, Maine area for about 10 years when a piece of property with a nice home on it was brought up to our attention by a mutual friend. This home was located a considerable distance to our north in the area of Moosehead Lake, which is one of the most beautiful regions of the state. After having gone and inspected the property, the two of us had decided to make the move. This was a beautiful older home that was only a short ride away from the southern portion of the lake near Greenville. Now, my wife and I are big into gardening, so we spend a fair amount of our time out and about in the yard. We typically have many tools and such leaning against the shed and laying here and there around the property. It was about the middle of summer when the two of us had gotten sick of telling each other that we'd misplaced something. We were constantly blaming each other whenever a tool could not be found. We decided to gather everything together, as far as our yard tools were concerned, and do an accounting of our inventory. After counting the tools, we determined that we were missing a 4-pronged rake, 2 spades, lopping shears, and 3 small hand shovels. Now trust me when I tell you that there was nobody visibly around us or our yard at any time of day or night, unless they snuck in unaware. When we realized that neither of us was to blame, the question now arose, who exactly was? It was then that my wife and I decided to call the police and file a report about the stolen property, as well as the possibility of a prowler of some sort being around. An officer showed up a short while later and took our report. All of us were in agreement, as we looked around the property, that we were in a fairly secluded area that would seem very odd for a thief to come around here. To steal a garden tool? At any rate, the officer filed the report and told us to keep in touch if there were any further activity in regards to the theft. I guess this would be a good time to tell you that we were right in the thick of things as far as the forest goes. Our property consisted of a cleared 5-acre lot that was virtually surrounded on all sides, with the exception of the driveway, by thick Maine forest. I'll also mention that our driveway was about 600 feet long and connected directly to a main road. After replacing most of the stolen tools with new ones, we had decided to keep all the tools in the shed, with the exception of 2 small garden shovels that were used more regularly. These 2 small handheld shovels were left lying on a marble-topped bistro-style pedestal table on our patio, the table that we regularly used for potting plants and other things. It was about 2 weeks after the officer had come to take our report of missing items that my wife came in from the backyard and said that both of the shovels were gone. the two of us went outside and were basically standing there scratching our heads as to what was going on with these tools. For whatever reason, we started to take a walk into the woods in the hopes of finding or seeing some type of clues regarding these tools. We must have been walking around for about an hour when my wife said, "Hey, check this out. There's a long-handled spade." As sure as my name is Lyle, there was our spade leaning against a tree in the woods. Not that we needed any confirmation, but all of our long-handled tools had a red band of paint that we applied to the handles. It didn't end there, and in fact, things got a little weirder. As we continued our walk, my wife once again said, "Oh my God, Lyle, look at that." She was pointing up on an angle at a tree just ahead of us, and there it was. One of our small potting shovels was stuck in the side of a tree about 9 feet off the ground. It appeared to be buried into the trunk several inches. Now, this little shovel was made of one piece of billet aluminum that had a black rubber handle for comfort. Just so you can understand, the edges on these are not sharp at all. In fact, they're rather blunt, maybe being about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch thick, and having a slight curvature to the business end of the tool. And yet, this tool was stuck into the tree several inches and high above our heads. My wife and I walked all the way back to the house to retrieve a 6-foot step ladder, as well as our camera, and walked back out to where the shovel was stuck in the tree. I opened up the ladder up next to the tree, and as my wife held it, I climbed up and tried to remove the shovel. Now, this tree was a large oak, and I could now see, being right on top of it, that the shovel was in a good 3 inches. I couldn't budge it so much as making it move to the slightest. We took a picture of it, and having made our way back home, we once again called the police. I should also tell you that we left the ladder in place by the tree so the policeman could see for himself what we were talking about. The time frame here is critical, so let me spell it out for you. It took us 10 minutes to get back to the house, and it was about another hour before the officer arrived. We talked at the house for about 10 minutes, and then it took us all of about another 10 or 15 minutes to get back out to where the shovel was in the tree. So, the total time we had been gone was about an hour and a half. As we were now nearing where we were sure we had been, my wife and I were looking, of course, for the folding 6-foot step ladder, the ladder we had left set up alongside of the tree. We were more than perplexed in that we could not find it. Now, there was nothing unusual about the tree, which had the shovel stuck into it. In fact, there were hundreds of this same type of tree. We seemed to be walking in circles when my wife, in her eagle eyes, yet again spied out the shovel stuck in the tree. Yet the ladder was nowhere to be found. You can just imagine the facial expressions of this policeman as the three of us are now standing in the woods, looking at this shovel stuck 9 feet up above our heads in a tree, and a couple of us saying that the ladder, which we just left set up for him, was now missing also. He stood under the tree shaking his head as to who or what could have shoved a garden shovel into a tree like that. He also took note of the fact that the handle's end had not been beaten with anything, such as a hammer. He now fully believed us about the missing ladder. We were all looking around for any type of clues on the ground and could find nothing. So back to the house we went. The policeman said that he was going to turn this over to a detective for further investigation, which he did. And the very next morning, my wife was outside amending some of the vegetables in the garden soil with some manure. In case you're not a gardener, the whole manure thing can make your yard a little stinky for a few days, and our yard was in fact stinky. That afternoon, the detective came by and we walked him back into the woods to see the shovel. As he stood there, he was baffled, as the three of us had been the day before, as to how the shovel could come to where it was, and why all of our tools had gone missing. Lyle and I knew that there was nothing they could really do, shy of catching someone red-handed. The detective left, having made the usual run-of-the-mill comments regarding the incident. It was 2 days later that my wife had gone out to the backyard to tend to the garden in her usual way. The garden she had freshly manured was penned in with 6-foot-tall chicken wire and measured 15 feet by 25 feet. This garden was comprised of half tomatoes and half lettuce, and the tomatoes were on the vine, so to speak. On one corner, there was a gate made of 2x4s with chicken wire stapled to them. The gate had a simple stockade fence type of clasp on it with no lock. The supports for the wire surrounding the garden, with the exception of where the gate was built, were the long flat metal stakes used to support the snow fencing. These were driven into the ground with a mallet type of device, and afterwards we wired the fencing to them. A few minutes after she'd gone out the back door, she came bursting back in the house yelling, "Honey, you have to come out here and take a look at this." We went out the door to find a section of the chicken wire was collapsed to the ground and the gate was still closed. We stood there looking at the damage, and our eyes immediately were drawn to what was a large amount of huge footprints within the garden soil. Looking at the plants, the tomatoes had been ransacked. There wasn't a single tomato left on the vines, be they green or ripened. The prints were enormous and had virtually flattened the majority of the bed. Almost every head of lettuce that had been growing was smashed. I had gone into the house to retrieve a tape measure. The footprints measured some 20 inches long, and at their widest point, being the toes, 11 inches. They were in the same shape of a gigantic human-like foot. We immediately called the detective, who left us a card, and he showed up some 2 hours later. When he entered the yard and saw for himself what we described on the phone, he was momentarily speechless. When he broke the silence, he said, "I believe these are the footprints of a Bigfoot. As crazy as that may sound." He said that they do get reports of such creatures in the state from time to time, but never had he imagined that he would be looking down on such evidential proof. The detective continued, "Everything makes sense now. Something with feet this large must have been enormous." Calls have come in through the years of people claiming to have seen these creatures ranging between 7 and 12 feet tall, crossing the streets or around their properties. This creature, be it mischievous or inquisitive, must have been grabbing your tools simply because it could, not knowing what they were for, and for whatever reason, had driven the shovel into the tree. It would also explain the height of which it was done. He said that he felt bad, but that there was nothing he could really do. He apologized and said he would pass it on to the wardens. After he left, my wife and I sat down for a little chat. We were discussing all the things that had transpired, including the notion that there was now a Bigfoot patrolling our property. The first thing that had drawn us to purchase this home was a very good price tag. The second was that the previous owners had created the garden beds that we're now using, including the one that had the tomatoes in it. The thought came to us that they had more than likely moved for the same reasons we were now going to. So we sold the house. We'd been living in Maine for quite some time and heard rumors here and there through the years of such creatures prowling about. One thing that needs to be understood about Maine is that this state is as big as the rest of New England combined. Having said that, over 90% of the state is uninhabited wilderness, where apparently everything and anything is roaming around out here, including a giant who can ram a shovel 3 inches into an oak tree. Well, that's today's story, folks. What do you think? I don't know if I'd... Yeah, I don't know. Would you sell the house or would you stick around? I mean, obviously, I have an interest in the subject, but I can't imagine if they're coming around my place what I'd do. I mean, it's not exactly a raccoon. I mean, you can't go out and set a live trap and relocate the things, or I guess there's some things you could do that you could ward them off. I don't know, maybe. But, I don't know. I mean, if they're not mischievous or dangerous, I think I might want to stick around, see if I can't get some footage. But, well, you tell me. Anybody listening from that part of the country? Let me know where you're listening from down in the comments. I appreciate y'all hanging out with me. And if you've had an encounter with a Bigfoot or anything cryptid or anything mysterious, shoot me an email at cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. And I'll see you in the next one.